I'm Mama Langlois, and if there's one thing I believe, it's that we need more books and movies about witches. Today's book club selection is the much anticipated Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, written by best-selling author Grady Hendrix. The reviews online are almost unanimous. It's an incredible, deeply moving book. I'm full of unpopular opinions. I like Philadelphia better than New York, I like Southern Comfort better than Deliverance, and those people that everyone else likes, I tend to want to eviscerate with a plastic spork.
I guess there's just two kinds of people, Miss Sandstone. My kind of people and assholes. It's rather obvious which category you fit into. Have a nice day.
And now I'm about to subject you to another one. I've enjoyed several of the Grady Hendrix books I've read. I love My Best Friend's Exorcism and the Southern Book Club's Guide to Destroying Vampires, and I thought Horror Store was a lot of fun. The Final Girl Support Group, on the other hand,
Hated it.
one of the reasons I enjoy Hendrix's work is I think he combines horror and humor well. While horror comedy is ubiquitous in film, it's rarer than you would think in print. The only other established writer in the genre I can think of who writes horror comedy frequently and effectively is Joe R. Lansdale, and maybe Michael McDowell. All Southerners, interestingly enough. Hendrix hails from Charleston, Lansdale's from East Texas, and McDowell is from Alabama. What can I say? I speak from experience. Being a Southerner gives you both an appreciation for the morbid and the absurd.
Listen, get this. There ain't but one thing that I want you to understand, and that's that I don't believe in anything.
Nothing at all?
Nothing.
Well, that's the problem with you preachers. You've all got too damn good to believe in anything.
I also think Hendrix is a great historian of genre paperbacks from the 70s and 80s, and I appreciate all the work he's done with the paperbacks from Hellline in order to get some of those books back into print. So, as excited I was for a new book about witches, I was unfortunately not impressed with this one.
Oh, you gonna make me read you on public access. Don't get mad.
Set in the halcyon year of 1970, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls is the story of 15-year-old Neva Craven, a Patty Duke-loving drama nerd who ends up pregnant after being pumped and dumped because she's kind of a dumbass.
News Bulletin, Petaluma, California, Associated Press. Children in the Petaluma School District were asked to bring in orange juice for all the girls between the ages of 12 and 14 who are pregnant. Parents are also asked to help out. It happens 250,000 times a year. Where is your daughter tonight? Teenage mother means 9 months of trouble.
Her outraged parents send her off to a home for unwed mothers in St. Augustine, Florida, where the girls do a lot of drudge work, eat a lot of unsalted food, and wait to deliver their babies so they can be put up for adoption. The home is a combination of Dickensian orphanage and boarding school, where the girls have zero say over their lives. The doctor is a dismissive, gaslighting jerk, and it is stressed repeatedly that the girls have very little knowledge about their reproductive systems and birth control. They're even stripped of their names, rechristened with a floral pseudonym, so Neva is renamed Fern. Among her fellow pregnoids, she meets the feral Holly, sensible piano player Zinnia, and Rose, a loudmouth hippie who of course comes from a cushy background and mostly regurgitates slogans about imperialism and police brutality. If you're familiar with this channel, you already know what I think of Rose. But thank God the bookmobile comes to rescue them from the daily grind, and the bookmobile's librarian is not quite what she seems. She gives Neva Fern the book How to Be a Groovy Witch, and before you know it, the girls are dabbling in witchcraft, turning the tables on their captors, but as always, there's a price to be paid for supernatural power. But who's surprised a bunch of pregnant teenagers don't understand consequences?
From Jesus! That's what he would do!
In his acknowledgement at the end of the book, Hendrix states that the idea came from finding out that 2 of his relatives had fallen pregnant as teenagers and been sent to an unwed mother's home to give their babies up for adoption. He writes that girls-like characters in Witchcraft or Wayward Girls were victims, again, of the patriarchy, who either had no access to birth control methods or knowledge about how to use them, and if they had been alive in more educated times, things would have been different.
Writing a book, hippie? Why don't you go listen to some folk music and give me a break?
Given the four girls in the novel are portrayed as very sheltered upper middle class girls, but I think offers a disingenuous Diet Coke version of history, where it was all just the dark ages until a certain turning point when the culture became enlightened. While there's always been a lot of misinformation regarding women's hormones and reproductive health, I think women, and even teenage girls, in 1970 were a little savvier than Hendrix is portraying.
Remember, you're fighting for this woman's honor, which is probably more than she ever did.
Maybe they would have been quite so naive if they weren't being constructed to make a heavy-handed point. Or if they had just read Valley of the Dolls.
Boobies, boobies, boobies. Nothing but boobies. Who needs them? I did great without them.
Don't let those boomers fool you. America's first sexual revolution took place in the 1920s, and prophylactics, which had existed in some form since 3000 BC, were widely available during the setting of the book, with 42% of people of reproductive age relying on them for birth control. Despite its feminist pretensions, I find the narrative women as hapless victims of a faceless patriarchy who have no agency and no personal responsibility to be infantilizing rather than empowering.
This isn't some communist daycare center!
Is this one of those books that people have to pretend it's more profound than it is because it's checking the right cause du jour boxes?
Who is responsible for this?
I am.
Talk to us about it.
It's my response to the issue of a woman's right to choose. It's something I feel super strongly about.
Isn't this a wonderful peace class? This definitely falls into that higher category of art I was speaking of earlier.
The book is also largely about the abuse of power, first by the adults who run the unwed mother's home and the doctors in charge of their care, but then by the girls themselves in employing witchcraft. There's a great scene involving the female characters bonding as they help one girl deliver her baby, contrasted with the more dehumanizing hospital birth earlier in the novel. This harkens back to a pre-industrial agrarian feminism, reminding me of an observation by Camille Paglia that modern women are unhappy because they miss the bond of other women, birthing and raising children together, managing the demands of the farm and the household together, where now they are potential competitors for both jobs and romantic attention. I think the book is attempting to address some interesting issues, but it does so in broad self-righteous strokes rather than with nuance.
Look, I don't know what the hell your point is, but I don't...
The point is of no return, and you've reached it.
In his previous novels, I thought Hendrix was very good at writing women. In Southern Book Club's Guide to Destroying Vampires, each woman represented a Southern female archetype, and as someone who's lived in the South most of her life, they were all hilarious and very familiar. But in Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, the characters feel much more tropey and cardboard. She's imbued with a few quirks, but Neva Fern is a cipher for most of the book, and her character transformation feels forced, more like it was a requirement of the plot than any genuine growth. And for an author who is so good at depicting female friendship in My Best Friend's Exorcism and Southern Book Club's Guide for Destroying Vampires, the female friendship in Witchcraft also feels phoned in. Again, in his acknowledgement, Hendrix says that the original drafts of this novel did not even have any witchcraft in it, and that the book went through dozens of rewrites, which I think is why the theme and tone feel jumbled, like this book had too many notes from too many different editors. And last thing, why is this 500 pages? Are you people being paid by the word? What happened to brevity is the soul of wit? Honestly, the whole time I was reading this, I was wishing I was reading How to Be a Groovy Witch. That sounded way more entertaining. Join me next time for another story about a groovy witch who longs for unconditional love, but is casting love spells in all the wrong places. I'm talking about the Love Witch.
So I was a bad girl.
But until next time, pleasant nightmares.